Disney World Splash Mountain in the Magic Kingdom is closing January 23rd, 2023 to retheme to Tiana's Bayou Adventure. In the words of Shakespeare, I am amazed and know not what to say. Actually, I do know what to say, and here it is. SOS! Save Splash Mountain! Please let it remain in both parks. Bring back the Breres, Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, and Brer Bear back to the parks, and also give Tiana her own restaurant or theme ride. Don't just give her hand-me-downs or scraps and tear down a classically beautiful ride. If this is to honor the first African American princess, then don't you think she deserves her own ride that was built out of new materials, not hand-me-downs? It just amazes me that for our world, that in the United States, we're saying that we're open-minded and we don't hold too much judgment. And yet, Song of the South has been available commercially for decades in several countries, including the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Germany, Netherlands, Japan, Argentina, and Brazil without any complaints. And yet it's not available on Disney Plus. As you know, as much as the people that work for the Disney companies say that they're doing their best to live up to Disney's expectations and, respecting the people and what the public says, it's amazing that you're not listening to people like us from Save Splash Mountain and die-hard Splash Mountain fans, and us who are trying our best to do what we can to save our beautiful ride that we love. It's just sad that some people don't realize how much Walt Disney truly wanted Song of the South to stay and be part of his beautiful family that he created. In fact, as early as 1938, Walt explored the story possibilities of making a film based on Joel Chandler Harris's classic tales. At one time, there was a discussion of a series of animated shorts. Then there was the idea about the full-length animated feature film. In fact, Walt had other Brer Rabbit stories prepared for the possibility that if the film was a huge success, which it was and still is, that he would produce feature-length sequels with live-action Uncle Remus telling stories of the other critters. And in a publicity release connected with the film's premiere, Walt Disney had stated, "I was familiar with the Uncle Remus tales since boyhood. From the time I began making animated features, I have had them definitely in my production plans. But until now, the medium was not ready to give them the adequate film equivalent in scope and fidelity. I always felt that Uncle Remus should be played by a living person, as should the young boy whom Harris relates his vivid stories of the Briar Patch. Several tests in previous pictures, especially the Three Caballeros, were encouraging in the way living action and animation could be devoted. Finally, months ago, we took our foot in hand, the words of Uncle Remus, and jumped into our most venturesome but also pleasurable undertaking. So while we naturally had to compact the substance of many tales into those selected for our Song of the South in Technicolor, the task was not too difficult, and I hope nothing of the spirit and the earthy quality of the fables was lost. It is their timeless and living appeal, their magnificent pictorial quality, their rich and tolerant humor, their homely philosophy and cheerfulness, which made Uncle Remus Legends the top choice for our first production with flesh and blood players. Now, many people who haven't understood Song of the South or even seen it or judging it because of how others have judged it horribly think that Walt Disney did because he was racist. But from those words, does that really sound like somebody who was so hateful and spiteful and vindictive? There was also another release quoted around 1946 that said, from Walt Disney, "Out of the past of every nation has come its folklore, simple tales handed down from generation to generation, and made immortal by such names as Aesop, the Brothers Grimm, and Hans Christian Andersen. But no folk tales are better loved than Joel Chandler Harris's Uncle Remus. And if now, in Song of the South, we have succeeded in a measure to help perpetuate the priceless literary treasure, my co-workers and I shall indeed be very happy. Anyway, my point being, again, does that sound like somebody who is mean and spiteful and wants to humiliate people? I don't think so. Not to mention, it pains me that Disney company lately has been doing what they can to try to diminish Song of the South, even removing Zippity Doo-Dah from the parks. How could that song be possibly offensive or racist? There's even one part I truly love called about the bluebird on my shoulder. I looked up online about what the bluebird symbolizes. It's joy, hope, happy souls. And people who have the animal totem of the bluebird are lovely and creative. Everybody loves the company of these kind people. There's never a dull moment, which is case in point of Uncle Remus and Johnny in the movie. When Uncle Remus sits and tells his story, there's not a dull moment. Even if there wasn't any animation, I could just sit and listen to that person tell his stories and just be enchanted and entranced by them. And then, of course, Johnny, when he does his best to cheer up his friend Jenny. And at the end, when he's singing Zippity Doo-Dah with his friends, just like Uncle Remus, it's the bluebird that sits on his shoulder. Because he, like Uncle Remus, is a bluebird. And there's so many parts in the movie that I just want to explain to people and show that why it's not offensive. This story takes place during the Reconstruction after the Civil War. Now, there are some points I want to point out about why that's true. For starters, there's no white foreman or any slave driver overseeing the work in the fields. You don't see any of the people working there that are beaten or humiliated. Nothing. For instance, there's one point I love in the story, and when I say story, I mean part in the movie, where Uncle Remus comes into the kitchen and he eats a piece of pie that's fresh from the oven. Now I ask you, how many plantations do you know that actually would allow that? Any slave who would have done that would have been severely punished. Case in point, Harriet Tubman. When she was a little girl, she was punished severely for eating sugar cubes out of a sugar bowl. And also there's one point where Uncle Remus packs up and leaves the place. Well, he starts to leave the place. I'm not saying anything more, no spoilers. And that's something that only a free man could have done. A slave would have just been considered a piece of property belonging to the owner and would not have been allowed to leave so freely. And there's so many, once again, amazing points about this movie. Song of the South was innovative for its time, not only for its blending of live action and animation together, but its depiction of black and white children playing together as equals. And there's one point of that in the movie where Johnny plays with a little boy, and they're riding sticks like horses. It's one of my favorite parts that makes me smile. But again, I don't want to go too much into the movie. You'll have to see for yourself. And it's a story where the African American characters are wise and caring, while there are a few white characters in there that are often cruel and sensitive or just dysfunctional. Well, one case in point are the two Favor boys. There's Joe and there's Jake. They're really mean to poor Johnny, teasing him because he's wearing a white lace collar around his neck. And there's one point where they push their poor little sister in the mud. You know, this is taking place when the movie was filmed at a time when most Hollywood films showcased African American performers in separate segments that would be deleted when the film was shown in southern theaters. Walt Disney portrayed a world where everyone lived together. And isn't that what we were all striving for? And it has been helped by so many wonderful people, such as Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. And that's what we're trying to do in our groups on Facebook, which anyone who's watching this who's not a member, I encourage you to join us if you like. We welcome new members with open arms and open hearts. There are so many of us joined together, and it doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter what age you are, what your gender is, what the color of your skin is, what your religious background is, and where you are in the world. It doesn't matter. We have many different people of all different cultures joining us, and we're open to love and honesty and open minds. And there's one other great point I wanted to point out about this movie, about why it's so wonderful. The last time the film was released theatrically was in 1986, its 40th anniversary. And at that time, it was the highest gross re-release ever from the Disney Company. And also, there was no rioting or picketing like it was back then. Nor did Disney's stock drop. Hint, hint. But yeah, and that's one thing that's sad. When I say there wasn't any rioting or picketing, that's because in the early shows of the screening, there was riots and picketing going on during the performances when they were showing the film. It was just so harsh because, as I stated before, the NAACP wrote a bad review and they didn't even bother to see the film. That's why people are so misjudged, and that's why I believe people are misjudging about this film today. They're just going about what people have said before. And how can you not like something if you've never seen it, or tried it, or embraced it? And there's so much, again, that's beautiful about this film, especially James Baskett. It was his last role that he played before he passed away, and he did such a splendid job. In fact, for the 1948 Academy Awards, he received an honorary Oscar for his portrayal of Uncle Remus. Walt had personally lobbied for such a recognition for the actor who his daughter Diane said was one of his favorite performers. So that's what I'm trying to reach out and show to you all. And it's amazing because despite the desires and actions of the Walt Disney Company, Song of the South simply refuses to fade away. And that's what we're trying to do. Even now, with the ride still going, there are still people singing Zippity-Doo-Dah. And there's still people who love to look out and see the movie and buy the merchandise that's still available some places. And that's one thing we're trying to reach out. So please, once again, Bob Iger, Disney Company, open your hearts and your minds. Is this truly what you want to have happen to the Disney Company? To close off a classic ride that's based on beautiful stories that have been passed down from generations? And not to mention, I'm not saying Tiana shouldn't have her own ride. Far from it. At D23, there was a mention that you're expanding the Magic Kingdom to add a place for Encanto, Coco, and even the Disney villains. So why not add something for Princess Tiana? In fact, you could actually create her restaurant that's just like how it looks in the movie. You could actually have a live jazz band playing. You could have Cajun cuisine. You could have character meet and greets. And like in the Mexico Pavilion, you could actually have a little boat ride and show animatronics and special effects that show Tiana and her adventures, just like you do for the Three Caballeros. It would be wonderful. And not to mention, you're honoring the first African-American princess by giving her hand-me-downs when Cinderella's castle, Snow White's castle, the Belle Castle for Beauty and the Beast, and the Little Mermaid Castle was all built from scratch. Please, and also cast of the Princess and the Frog, Anika, Oprah. Is this really how you want the first princess of color to be honored? By giving her hand-me-downs and scrapping a ride that has been based on beautiful stories that have such emotion and beauty, and not just from African Americans. It's also been passed down by Native Americans, by Aztecs. And if people are still concerned and they don't understand, then one thing you could do is in the Briar Patch gift shop, you could put posters on the wall, pictures that depict the beauty of it and the historical facts, so people will be clear and understand. And And plus, it would express more about the amazing ride that it is. And even though there's that announcement that you're going to change the Magic Kingdom Splash Mountain, I, along with so many others, refuse to accept it. We will still continue